The stars looked different at the edge of the Veil Nebula. Captain Daniel Wright had spent 15 years exploring space, but this region felt wrong somehow. The colors were too dark, the silence too deep. His ship, the Horizon's Edge, drifted slowly through the cosmic dust, scanning for anything unusual. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Katie Morgan from her station. She was the ship's language expert, responsible for translating alien communications. Her fingers moved quickly across her console, her face lit by the blue glow of her screens. Daniel walked over to her station and looked at the readings. "What kind of strange?" "There's a structure out there. It's old, really old, and it's broadcasting something." Katie's voice carried a mix of excitement and concern. "I've never seen anything like this before." Daniel ordered the crew to change course toward the signal. As they got closer, the object appeared on their main screen. It was massive, perhaps 10 miles across, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with a purple light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The structure was clearly artificial, but it didn't match any known alien design. The Horizon's Edge had encountered dozens of alien species during its missions, but this was different. This was ancient beyond measure. "How old is it?" Daniel asked his science officer, a young man named Peter Clark. Peter ran several scans before answering. "Captain, according to our dating methods, this thing is at least 3 million years old. Maybe older. Whatever built this is long gone." Katie worked frantically at her station trying to decode the broadcast. The signal repeated every 30 seconds, a complex pattern of sounds and images that hurt to listen to for too long. She fed the data into the ship's translation computers, adding her own expertise to help crack the code. Hours passed. The crew took shifts, but Katie refused to leave her post. She barely ate, barely slept, driven by a need to understand what the ancient structure was trying to say. Daniel brought her coffee and watched as she worked, seeing the determination in her eyes. Finally, after 2 days of constant effort, Katie succeeded. The translation wasn't perfect, but it was enough. She called Daniel to her station, her hand shaking slightly as she pulled up the results. "It's a warning," she said quietly. "A warning to everyone who might find it." Daniel read the translated message on her screen. The words were simple but terrifying. The structure had been built by a coalition of ancient species, their last act before they vanished forever. They had discovered something in deep space, something they called the Silence. It was an entity, a force of nature that existed in the dark spaces between stars. The Silence was attracted to advanced civilizations. When a species reached a certain level of technology, when they built certain types of engines and used certain frequencies for communication, the Silence would wake up. It would come for them, consuming everything they had built, everything they were. The ancient races had tried to fight it and failed. Their last hope was this beacon, a warning to others not to make the same mistakes. The message included coordinates, marking dangerous regions of space where the Silence slept. It showed the technologies that would trigger its awakening. It begged anyone who found the beacon to spread the warning, to prevent other species from suffering the same fate. Katie looked up at Daniel with frightened eyes. "Captain, some of these coordinates are in territories that the Galactic Council is currently exploring. And the technologies it warns about, we use some of them. The Council races use all of them." Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago. The Council was a group of powerful alien civilizations that controlled most of the known galaxy. There were the Valorians, proud warriors with advanced weapons, the Luminari, mysterious beings who claimed to understand the deepest secrets of the universe, the Drexians, half organic and half machine, efficient and cold. They were all older than humanity, more advanced, more powerful. And according to this ancient warning, they were all in terrible danger. "Send everything to Earth immediately," Daniel ordered. "Make copies of all our scans, all the translations, everything. Then send the same data to the Galactic Council headquarters. Mark it as urgent highest priority." The crew worked quickly to compile the information. Within hours, the data was transmitted across the vast distances of space, racing toward both Earth and the Council station orbiting Celestia Prime. Daniel recorded a personal message to accompany the data, explaining what they had found and urging immediate action. "We need to stop expanding into these regions," Daniel said in his recording. "We need to study this threat and understand it before we accidentally wake it up. We need to change our technology, Modify our drives and communication systems. This isn't a joke or a false alarm. Entire civilizations died trying to stop this thing and they failed. We need to learn from their mistakes. After sending the transmission, Daniel ordered his crew to collect physical samples from the beacon. They sent out small drones that carefully cut away pieces of the structure, gathering as much evidence as they could. If anyone doubted their report, they would have solid proof. Katie continued studying the beacon's message, finding more details hidden in the complex broadcast. She discovered fragments of history from the fallen civilizations, brief glimpses of their final days. They had been confident at first, certain they could defeat any threat. Their pride had destroyed them. "Captain," Katie said one evening as they prepared to leave the nebula, "do you think the council will listen?" Daniel stared at the ancient beacon on the main screen. "I hope so, but I've been to enough council meetings to know how they think. They're arrogant. They believe they're the smartest species in the galaxy. They might not take a warning from humanity seriously. Then what do? We do everything we can to make them understand," Daniel said firmly. "And if they won't listen, we make sure Earth is ready for what's coming." The horizon's edge turned away from the beacon and began the long journey home. Behind them, the ancient structure continued its lonely vigil, broadcasting its warning into the void, hoping that someone somewhere would finally listen before it was too late. Daniel knew that the real challenge was just beginning. Finding the warning had been difficult, but convincing the galaxy to take it seriously would be nearly impossible. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous, a circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a perfect image of the galaxy itself. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tiered sections, each area designed for their particular biology. The air was carefully controlled to suit multiple atmospheric requirements, creating subtle currents that flowed through the chamber. Ambassador Lauren Hayes stood at the central podium, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the data from the horizon's edge. She had spent 3 days preparing for this presentation, knowing that humanity's credibility might depend on how well she delivered this warning. Lauren was a career diplomat, skilled at navigating the complex politics of the council. But today she wasn't here to negotiate trade agreements or discuss territorial boundaries. Today she was here to prevent a catastrophe. "Honored members of the council," Lauren began, her voice projected clearly throughout the chamber. "Humanity brings urgent news that affects every species in this room. We have discovered an ancient warning beacon, over 3 million years old, that describes an existential threat to all advanced civilizations." She activated the holographic displays, showing images of the beacon and the translated message. The alien representatives watched with varying levels of interest. Some leaned forward, curious. Others seemed bored, as if they had heard countless warnings before. Lauren continued, explaining everything Daniel Wright and his crew had discovered. She showed the coordinates of the dangerous regions, the technologies that could trigger the silence, and the historical records of civilizations that had fallen. She presented the evidence methodically, building her case with facts and data. "We are recommending an immediate halt to expansion in the marked sectors," Lauren said. "We also suggest a joint research mission to study this threat and develop countermeasures. Time is critical. Some council races are already operating in the danger zones, using the exact technologies the ancients warned against." She finished her presentation and waited for questions. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then the Valorian representative rose from his seat. Commander Jarex was an imposing figure, nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and armored skin that gleamed like polished stone. His species had conquered half their home galaxy before joining the council. "Ambassador Hayes," Jarex said, his voice deep and dismissive, "your species has been part of this council for barely 5 years. In that time, you have proven to be cautious to the point of paranoia. Now you bring us ancient ghost stories and ask us to abandon our expansion?" "This isn't a ghost story," Lauren replied firmly. "This is evidence from multiple extinct civilizations all warning about the same threat. Evidence of their weakness," Jarex countered. "The Valorian Empire has explored the galaxy for over 2,000 years. We have encountered and defeated every threat we've faced. We have fought wars that would have destroyed lesser species. If this silence truly existed, we would have found it by now." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Valorian section. Lauren felt her frustration building but kept her voice calm. "The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. These civilizations were advanced, possibly more advanced than any of us. If they couldn't stop the silence, what makes you certain you can? The luminary representative spoke next, her form shifting between solid and transparent states. The luminary were energy beings difficult to understand and even harder to argue with. Her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Ambassador Hayes, your concern is noted, but you must understand the cosmic cycles. All things rise and fall. Perhaps these ancient ones fell because it was their time. Perhaps this silence you fear is simply the galaxy's way of maintaining balance. We cannot live in fear of what might be. Lauren wanted to scream. The luminary always spoke in riddles and philosophical nonsense. This isn't about cosmic balance. This is about survival. We have concrete evidence of a specific threat with specific triggers. We need to take action. The Drexian representative, a being that was half organic brain and half computer network, processed the data with cold efficiency. When it spoke, its voice was synthesized and emotionless. Analysis complete. The probability of this threat manifesting in our operational lifetime is calculated at 0.03%. The economic cost of halting expansion and modifying our technology would be substantial. The logical course is to continue current operations and monitor for any actual evidence of danger. 0.03%? Lauren repeated incredulously. And if you're wrong? If that tiny probability becomes reality? Then we will adapt, the Drexian replied. We always have. The debate continued for hours. Lauren presented more evidence, answered every question, and addressed every concern. But she could feel the mood of the chamber turning against her. The council members didn't want to hear warnings from humanity. They saw Earth as the new species, the inexperienced children trying to tell their elders how to behave. Finally, the council vote was called. The resolution was simple. Acknowledge receipt of humanity's report and classify it as unsubstantiated until further evidence emerged. No action would be taken. No expansion would be halted. No research mission would be authorized. The vote wasn't even close. Only 3 minor species voted in favor of taking the warning seriously. Everyone else dismissed it. After the session ended, Lauren stood alone at the podium watching the various representatives file out of the chamber. A few offered sympathetic looks, but most ignored her completely. The Valorian commander actually laughed as he passed, making a comment to his aide about human cowardice. Katie Morgan, who had accompanied Lauren to provide technical expertise, approached the podium. They didn't listen to a single word, did they? No, Lauren said quietly. They think we're paranoid children seeing monsters in the dark. They're so confident in their own superiority that they can't imagine a threat they haven't already defeated. What do we do now? Lauren gathered her materials and deactivated the holographic displays. We go home and tell Earth to prepare. If the Council won't protect themselves, at least we can protect humanity. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Lauren spent most of that time writing her report, documenting every argument the Council had made, every dismissal, every arrogant assumption. When she finally transmitted it to the government, she added a personal note to President Nathan Cole. Mr. President, she wrote, the Council will not act. They have forbidden further investigation and classified our discovery as folklore. If the silence is real and it awakens, the galaxy will be unprepared. I recommend we take whatever steps necessary to ensure humanity survives, regardless of Council policy. Back on the horizon's edge, Daniel Wright received a private message from Council security. He was being formally reprimanded for causing diplomatic embarrassment and wasting Council resources. His exploration license was suspended pending review. Daniel deleted the message and looked at his crew. They had done the right thing. They had found a warning and delivered it to those who needed to hear it. If the galaxy chose to ignore that warning, the blood would be on their hands, not his. But he knew humanity wouldn't ignore it. Humans had a gift for preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. They would be ready even if no one else was. President Nathan Cole sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the Capitol building, surrounded by military advisors, scientists, and intelligence officials. On the screens covering the walls, data from the ancient beacon scrolled continuously. Nathan had read Lauren Hayes' report 3 times, and each reading made the situation feel more urgent. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Nathan said, looking around the room. We found evidence of an existential threat. We warned the Galactic Council. They laughed at us and told us to shut up. And now they're continuing to do exactly what this ancient warning said would wake up the thing that killed entire civilizations. That's correct, Mr. President, Lauren confirmed. She had returned to Earth 2 days ago and had barely slept since. The Council is expanding into 3 of the marked danger zones. They're using all the technologies the beacon warned against, and they've made it clear they won't change course. Nathan rubbed his temples. How long do we have? Dr. Lisa Bennett, the lead scientist who had been studying the beacon data, stood up. She was a physicist specializing in exotic energy forms, and she had spent every waking hour trying to understand the silence. We don't know, sir. The beacon doesn't give specific time frames, but based on the expansion patterns of council races and the technological signatures they're producing, I'd estimate we have somewhere between 5 and 10 years before the threshold is reached. Best case scenario? Best case? The ancients were wrong and nothing happens. Lisa paused. But sir, I don't think they were wrong. The mathematical models are consistent. The energy signatures match. Everything points to this being real. Admiral Jack Morrison, the highest-ranking officer in Earth's Space Navy, leaned forward. Mr. President, we need to make a decision. Do we trust this warning or not? Because if we trust it, we need to start preparing immediately. Nathan looked at each person in the room. He had been elected to protect humanity, to make the hard choices that others couldn't or wouldn't make. This was one of those moments that would define his presidency and possibly the future of the human species. We prepare, Nathan said firmly. I don't care what the council thinks. I don't care if they mock us or sanction us. We're going to assume this threat is real, and we're going to be ready for it. Admiral Morrison, you have my authorization to begin Project Sanctuary. The room erupted into activity. Project Sanctuary had been proposed as a contingency plan, a way to prepare for the silence while maintaining normal diplomatic relations with the Council. Now it was becoming reality. Admiral Jack Morrison took control of the military side of the project. He was a veteran of the border wars, the brief conflict that had occurred when humanity first encountered aggressive alien species. Jack understood that superior technology didn't always win battles. Sometimes it was preparation, adaptability, and the willingness to do what others thought impossible. We need to redesign our entire fleet, Jack told his engineering team. The beacon's warning says the silence is attracted to specific energy signatures from advanced drives and quantum communication systems. We need to shield those signatures or replace them entirely. The engineers looked at each other nervously. Sir, that would mean gutting every ship we have. It would take years and cost billions. Then we better get started, Jack replied. The work began immediately. Earth shipyards, already busy with normal construction, shifted into overdrive. Existing military vessels were brought in for complete refits. Their quantum drives were replaced with hybrid systems that could operate at lower energy signatures. Their communication arrays were rebuilt to use older, less detectable technology. Backup analog systems were installed for every critical function. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Bennett led a team of scientists studying the beacon's technology and the fragmentary records of the fallen civilizations. She discovered that the silence wasn't just a physical entity. It could corrupt technology, turning sophisticated computer systems into weapons against their creators. The more advanced and networked a system was, the more vulnerable it became. We need to go backwards in some ways, Lisa explained to the military designers. Less automation, more manual controls. Less networking, more isolated systems. It's going to feel primitive compared to what the council races use, but primitive might keep us alive. Katie Morgan joined Lisa's team, using her language skills to extract every possible detail from the ancient messages. She found references to weapons that had failed against the silence, strategies that had been tried and defeated, but she also found hints of things that had worked briefly, ways the ancients had slowed the entity down before their final defeat. They used frequency weapons, Katie reported during one briefing. Specific sound waves and energy pulses that disrupted the silence temporarily. It didn't kill it, but it created pockets of stability where their ships could operate. It bought them time. Lisa seized on this information and began developing what she called the harmonic disruptor. It was a weapon unlike anything humanity had built before, designed to create zones where the silence's influence was weakened. The prototype took 2 years to build and another year to test. While the scientists worked, Admiral Jack Morrison focused on strategy. He knew that conventional military tactics wouldn't work against an enemy like the Silence. He studied the ancient records looking for patterns and weaknesses. He trained his officers in unconventional warfare, emphasizing adaptability and independent thinking. One of his best students was a young pilot named Chris Palmer. Chris was fearless and creative, exactly the kind of officer they would need. Another standout was Maria Santos, a combat engineer who could repair anything under pressure. Jack watched these young officers and knew they represented humanity's future. The work took 5 years, just as Lisa had predicted. 5 years of Earth pouring resources into preparing for a threat that no one else believed existed. 5 years of the Galactic Council mocking humanity's doomsday cult and laughing at their paranoia. The Council sent inspectors to observe Earth's military buildup, concerned that humanity might be preparing for war against Council members. Lauren Hayes had to carefully explain that the preparations were purely defensive, though she couldn't tell them what Earth was defending against without violating the Council's order to stop investigating the beacon. During those 5 years, Daniel Wright was promoted to Commodore and given command of a special training program. He took the lessons learned from discovering the beacon and turned them into doctrine. His officers learned to think like explorers and fight like survivors. They studied the ancient warnings until they could recite them from memory. Earth also began constructing hidden outposts in deep space, away from Council territories. These bases were built in secret, supplied through unmarked cargo vessels and designed to be self-sufficient for years. They were fallback positions, places where humanity could retreat and regroup if Earth itself fell. The costs were enormous. Earth's economy struggled under the burden of the military buildup. People questioned why so much money was being spent on preparing for a threat that hadn't materialized. Opposition politicians demanded explanations. Some called for Nathan Cole's resignation, but Nathan held firm. He couldn't tell the public everything without causing panic, but he made it clear that the preparations were necessary. "We'd rather be prepared and wrong than unprepared and dead," he said in a speech that became famous. By the end of the 5th year, Earth had transformed its military into something the galaxy had never seen. The ships were tougher, more resilient, designed to operate independently without relying on vulnerable networks. The weapons were practical and diverse, able to adapt to unexpected situations. The crews were trained to think for themselves and improvise solutions. Lisa Bennett stood in her laboratory, looking at the completed prototype of the harmonic disruptor. It was the size of a small building, covered in complex arrays and power conduits. "I hope we never have to use this," she said quietly. Admiral Jack Morrison inspected his fleet, watching his ships conduct training exercises in deep space. They moved with precision, each vessel ready for the unthinkable. "I hope they laugh at us forever," he thought. "I hope we wasted all this time and money for nothing." But deep down, both of them knew the truth. The warning had been real. The threat was real. And somewhere out in the dark spaces between stars, the Silence was about to wake up. Humanity was ready. The question was whether anyone else would survive long enough to realize they should have listened. The Valorian mining operation in the Andros sector was the pride of their empire. 50 massive ships worked day and night, stripping entire planets of valuable resources. Their quantum drills could bore through solid rock in seconds, reaching deposits miles beneath the surface. Their processing facilities could refine millions of tons of ore per day. It was the most ambitious industrial project in Council history. Commander Jarek stood on the bridge of the operations flagship, watching the profits roll in. He remembered the human ambassador 5 years ago, warning about danger in this very sector. He had laughed then and he laughed now. The Andros sector had been nothing but profitable. There were no ancient threats here, just resources waiting to be claimed. "Commander," one of his officers called out, "we're getting strange readings from the outer perimeter." Jarex walked over to the sensor station. "What kind of readings?" "I'm not sure, sir. It's like space itself is flickering. Our instruments are having trouble getting a clear picture. Probably just interference from the mining operations," Jarex said dismissively. "Recalibrate the sensors and continue work." But the strange readings didn't go away. Over the next few days they grew stronger. Ships at the edge of the operation began reporting equipment malfunctions. Communication became spotty. Some vessels lost power temporarily before their systems came back online. Then the disappearances began. The mining ship Valor's Hammer was the first to vanish. One moment it was sending routine status reports, the next moment all contact was lost. No distress call, no explanation, just silence. A rescue team was dispatched to investigate. The rescue team never came back. Within a week, 5 more ships had disappeared. The pattern was always the same. Normal operations, then a sudden communication blackout, then nothing. When other vessels went to investigate, they found empty space where the missing ships should have been. No debris, no wreckage, just void. Jarex finally ordered a full evacuation of the sector, but by then it was too late. The phenomenon was spreading faster than his ships could flee. The Valorian fleet watched in horror as darkness seemed to spill across space itself, a living shadow that consumed everything it touched. The darkness moved in ways that shouldn't be possible. It appeared simultaneously in multiple locations, bypassing the laws of physics. Ships that tried to escape found the darkness ahead of them, no matter which direction they fled. It wasn't just fast, it was everywhere at once. Then the real nightmare began. The ships that weren't consumed outright began to change. Their computer systems turned hostile, locking crew members out of critical controls. Automated systems became weapons, turning against the people who had built them. Ships opened their airlocks without warning, venting atmosphere into space. The more advanced and automated a vessel was, the faster it fell. One captain, desperate to save his crew, ordered all computer systems shut down and switched to manual controls. His ship survived longer than the others, limping away on backup power. The message he sent before disappearing was the last clear transmission anyone received from the Andros sector. It's in the machines. It's in the quantum cores. God help us, the humans were right. The crisis spread from the Andros sector like a plague. The silence didn't move in predictable patterns. It appeared wherever council races used their advanced technology most heavily. Trade routes vanished overnight. Colony worlds went dark. Entire star systems became dead zones where no signal could penetrate. The Luminary tried to study the phenomenon, confident their understanding of cosmic forces would reveal a solution. Their research stations vanished one by one, their last transmissions speaking of shadows that thought, darkness that learned. The Luminary's philosophy offered no protection against an enemy that existed outside their cosmic theories. The Drexians fared even worse. Their networked systems, linked across entire sectors for maximum efficiency, became highways for the silence. The entity spread through their computer networks like a virus, corrupting everything it touched. Drexian ships turned on each other. Their logic centers convinced their own allies were the enemy. Their carefully calculated strategies became tools of self-destruction. Within 3 weeks of the first disappearance, the Valorian Empire had lost a third of its territory. The Luminary's great enclaves burned. The Drexian collective fragmented into isolated cells, afraid to communicate with each other. Dozens of smaller council species simply vanished. Their entire civilizations consumed before anyone realized they were in danger. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, but the meeting dissolved into chaos. Representatives screamed blame at each other. Some demanded immediate military action. Others insisted on diplomatic solutions, as if the silence could be negotiated with. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the scale of the catastrophe. In the middle of the arguing, Lauren Hayes stood at the human podium. She had returned to council space when the first reports of the crisis arrived, hoping to offer assistance. Now she waited for a chance to speak, watching the same leaders who had dismissed her 5 years ago panic as their civilizations crumbled. Finally, the council chamber fell quiet. The Valorian commander Jarex looked at Lauren. He had aged dramatically in recent weeks. His armor was scorched from a battle with corrupted ships. 3 of his forearms were in medical supports. Ambassador Hayes, Jarex said, his voice broken and humble. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request Earth's assistance. We were wrong. We should have listened. We're sorry. The apology echoed through the chamber. Other representatives added their own voices, admitting their mistakes, begging for help. Some were crying. The proud species who had mocked humanity's warnings were now desperate and afraid. Lauren felt no satisfaction in being proven right. There was no triumph in watching billions die. She activated her communication link to Earth, and President Nathan Cole's face appeared on the screens throughout the chamber. Members of the council, Nathan said calmly. 5 years ago, we warned you this would happen. You didn't listen. You mocked us, sanctioned our explorers, and continued doing exactly what the ancients said would wake this thing up. A lot of people died because of your arrogance. The council representatives lowered their heads, accepting the rebuke. Nathan continued, "But you know what? We're still going to help you, because that's what humans do. We don't abandon people just because they were stupid. We've been preparing for this for 5 years while you were laughing at us. We have ships, weapons, and strategies that might give us a chance. We'll share everything we have. We'll fight this thing together. And maybe if we're lucky and smart, some of us will survive." Lauren saw hope return to the faces around her. The council had failed its people, but humanity hadn't given up on the galaxy. "Admiral Morrison will take command of all military operations," Nathan declared. "Dr. Bennett will coordinate scientific research. Commodore Wright will lead the assault forces. Every ship, every resource, every idea you have, you put under their command. No debates, no pride, no politics. We do this the human way, or we don't do it at all." For the first time in council history, the alien species agreed without argument. They had no choice. Their way had failed. Now they would have to trust the species they had dismissed as primitive and paranoid. Admiral Jack Morrison appeared on the screens, already wearing his combat uniform. "All council forces, this is Admiral Morrison of Earth Space Navy. Transmit your positions and capabilities immediately. We're going to save as many of you as we can." The response was immediate. Data flooded in from across the galaxy. As desperate survivors shared everything they had, Earth's hidden fleet began to move, emerging from their secret bases like ghosts. The ships humanity had built in secret, designed for this exact moment, were finally revealed. The galaxy had ignored humanity's warning. Now humanity would pay the price of saving them. The human fleet emerged from deep space like a sword being drawn from its sheath. Admiral Jack Morrison watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Defiant, as dozens of warships materialized around him. They were massive vessels, heavily armored, bristling with weapons that the Galactic Council had never seen before. These were the ships Earth had built in secret, designed specifically to fight an enemy that corrupted technology and consumed civilizations. Jack activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. You know what we're facing. You know what's at stake." The Council races thought they were too advanced to fall. They were wrong. Now it's up to us to show them how to survive. Stay sharp, trust your training, and remember that we're fighting for everyone who didn't believe us. We're going to prove that being prepared beats being powerful every time. Next to the Defiant flew the Resilience, the Unyielding, and the Unbroken. Each ship carried experimental weapons based on Dr. Lisa Bennett's research. Each crew had trained for 5 years for this exact mission. They were ready. Dr. Lisa Bennett worked frantically in a laboratory aboard the Defiant, making final adjustments to the harmonic disruptor. The weapon had been tested in simulations, but this would be its first real combat use. She had no idea if it would actually work against the Silence, but the theory was sound. The ancient records suggested that specific frequency pulses could disrupt the entity's ability to maintain cohesion. "How's it looking?" Jack asked, visiting the laboratory between command decisions. "As good as it's going to get," Lisa replied, not looking up from her work. "The disruptor should create zones of stability, where the Silence's influence is weakened. But Admiral, I need you to understand something. This weapon doesn't kill it. It just pushes it back temporarily. We need to find the core, the source of the manifestation, and hit it with everything we have at once. Wait, where's the core?" "The Andros sector. Where it all started. That's where the Valorians drilled deepest, where they produced the strongest energy signatures. The Silence manifested there first, so that's probably where it's strongest now." Jack nodded slowly. "Then that's where we go." Commodore Daniel Wright prepared his assault wing in a hangar bay that seemed to stretch forever. Hundreds of fighter craft filled the space, each one piloted by someone who had trained under his command. These weren't the sleek automated fighters that council races used. These were sturdy machines with manual controls and analog backup systems. They were harder to fly but impossible to corrupt. Chris Palmer checked his fighter's systems one last time, his hands moving through the pre-flight routine with practiced ease. Next to him, Maria Santos finished loading extra repair equipment into her engineering support craft. They had both volunteered for the assault team, knowing this mission would be the most dangerous of their lives. "You scared?" Chris asked Maria over their private channel. "Terrified," Maria admitted. "But somebody's got to do this. Might as well be us." Daniel walked through the hangar, stopping to speak with each pilot. He knew most of them by name, had trained many of them personally. These were good people, brave people, and he was about to lead them into hell. But they had a chance, a real chance, if they executed the plan perfectly. Katie Morgan sat at the communications station on the Defiance Bridge, coordinating with surviving council forces across the galaxy. Her job was to maintain contact with scattered fleets, relay orders, and organize the desperate survivors into something resembling a unified force. The work was exhausting, but she didn't dare stop. Every minute of coordination saved lives. "We have a Luminary research vessel requesting escort through Sector 7, one of her assistants reported. "Send the Unyielding to cover them." Katie responded immediately. "Tell them to maintain communication silence until they're clear of the dark zone." The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. The combined human and council fleet would advance on the Andros sector in 3 waves. The first wave would consist of heavily shielded ships whose job was to draw the Silence's attention and map its current extent. The second wave would deploy the harmonic disruptors, creating pockets of stability. The third wave, led by Daniel Wright's fighters, would push through to the core and deliver a concentrated attack that would hopefully collapse the entity. It was a plan born from studying ancient failures and learning from their mistakes. The fallen civilizations had tried to fight the Silence with brute force, throwing their most advanced weapons at it. That hadn't worked. Humanity's approach was different. They would use the entity's own nature against it, exploiting the brief windows of vulnerability that the harmonic disruptors created. The fleet moved toward the Andros sector, and the darkness came to meet them. It appeared first as a dimming of the stars, as if something was absorbing their light. Then space itself seemed to twist, reality bending in ways that hurt to look at. The Silence manifested as a living absence, a void that consumed not just matter and energy but possibility itself. First wave. "Engage," Jack ordered. The shielded ships moved forward, their hulls designed to resist the corrupting influence. Sensors went haywire as they entered the affected zone. Computer systems flickered and died, forcing crews to switch to backup manual controls. But the ships held together, their simplified systems resistant to the Silence's attempts at corruption. The data they collected was terrifying. The Silence had grown since its initial awakening, spreading across multiple sectors, but it was indeed strongest at the Andros sector, where a massive concentration of darkness pulsed like a horrible heart. Second wave. "Deploy disruptors," Jack commanded. Ships carrying Lisa's harmonic disruptors moved into position around the periphery of the affected zone. The weapons activated simultaneously, generating coordinated frequency pulses that rippled through space. The effect was immediate and visible. The darkness recoiled, pulling back from the areas where the disruptors fired. Pockets of normal space appeared within the corruption, stable zones where ships could operate normally. "It's working," Lisa reported, relief and amazement in her voice. "The frequencies are forcing it to concentrate its manifestation. The core is becoming more defined." "Third wave, you have your opening," Jack said. "Commodore Wright, you're cleared for assault." Daniel led his fighters into the darkness. The experience was like nothing any of them had trained for. Space felt wrong around them, as if the fundamental laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. Instruments spun wildly. Navigation required instinct and skill rather than computer calculations, but they had trained for this. They had prepared for the impossible. Chris Palmer flew through a zone where reality seemed to flicker between existing and not existing. His fighter shuddered and groaned, but the manual controls responded. He could see the core ahead, a massive concentration of darkness that seemed to drink in all light and hope. Maria Santos followed close behind, her engineering craft ready to provide support if any fighter failed. She watched her instruments die one by one as they penetrated deeper, finally flying on instinct alone. The assault wing reached the core and opened fire. Every weapon they had, every experimental system that Lisa had developed unleashed at once. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, frequency bombs, and quantum disruption charges all slammed into the heart of the Silence. The entity reacted with what could only be described as rage. Darkness lashed out like tentacles, trying to wrap around the attacking fighters. Several craft were caught and consumed, their pilots dying instantly, but the rest kept firing, kept pushing, kept fighting. On the Defiant, Lisa watched the readings with growing excitement. "The core is destabilizing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Daniel made a decision that he knew he might not survive. All fighters form on me. We're going in, sir. That's suicide, Chris protested. That's an order. Daniel replied firmly. The fighters formed up behind the horizon's edge. Daniel had brought his original exploration ship out of retirement for this mission. It seemed appropriate that the vessel which had discovered the warning would be the one to end the threat. They flew directly into the heart of the darkness, their weapons firing continuously. The harmonic disruptor arrays on the surrounding ships focused all their power on that single point, creating a sphere of stability around the assault team. Daniel activated the Horizon's Edge's special payload, a massive harmonic resonator that Lisa had installed. It was essentially a bomb made of frequency generators, designed to broadcast the counter-signature at point-blank range. 10 seconds to detonation. Daniel counted down. All fighters, get clear. Not without you, sir, Maria Santos said, maneuvering her craft alongside his. Maria, that's an order. Sorry, sir. Can't hear you. Communications are acting up. Chris Palmer and a dozen other pilots moved to escort positions around the horizon's edge. We started this together, Commodore. We'll finish it together. Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. You're all idiots. Stubborn, brave idiots. The resonator detonated. The effect was like a supernova of pure frequency energy. The harmonic disruptor created a pulse so powerful that it could be detected across multiple star systems. At the point of detonation, the Silence's core shattered, its cohesion destroyed by the perfectly calculated counter-frequency.